Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a tale about a Legend of Zelda Dungeons & Dragons game that is both weird and confusing, a story about a player that gets screwed over by an injury table, and much more. But before we get into those, if you end up liking the video, I hope you consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Not only does it help the channel out loads, but it also makes Nipsey extremely happy.
Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I really like this toy.
He really does like that toy, huh? But with the standard YouTube stuff done, let's get right into these stories. A Zelda campaign with a lack of communication between the party and the DM. By Reddit user GoldHero101. Hey y'all, sorry in advance about my grammar, as, well, I'm not the most grammatically sound writer there is. I'll do my best though. As for the story itself, I guess some background is in order. This was the start of a Zelda campaign by a friend, and played with a group of friends, whom I'm still friends with to this day, despite all that happened. I'm simply just going to be using the class names, as our players include myself as the Sheikah Rogue/Warlock, a Korok Artificer, a Hylianoid Robot Gunslinger, and a Gerudo Barbarian. Anyway, the problems didn't start right away, and Session 1 was fine, for the most part. We fought another Hylianoid who was really damn hard to hit though. I tried to stealth around it, but I couldn't really hide from it due to a high perception score. It was fine. We were only level 3, and we only had to fight this thing. It was just me and the Artificer who were forced to engage the encounter, but we were bailed out by the rest of the party arriving, and with an amazing roll by the Barbarian. And he threw it off a cliff. Though, apparently, it had over 200 HP for a level 3 party. Fine, I mean, it was a random encounter. At least no one got killed. Our characters rested, and we ended there. Not so bad, right? Well, I don't know. A fight with an enemy with over 200 HP at the start of the game with a level 3 party is pretty bad in my book. Then, Session 2 came. My character had a job that involved finding out what was happening in Zora's domain, so we climbed a mountain to get a view through some fortunate rolls. Though we had at least 5 rolls, and we nearly fell several times. Though we reached the top safely. When we reached the top, we managed to hear a Zora who was in trouble, so we went towards the voice. But then, combat ensued. Most of these enemies were lower level monsters, fortunately, but there was a stationary Guardian as well. For those of you that are unaware, Guardians are capable of firing laser beams that are capable of extraordinary damage. So, yeah, I got blasted by one of the lasers for, and I quote, 10d6 damage. 10d6 at level 3. Needless to say, I was completely disintegrated, as I was low on health. I was offered a deal to become a warlock and resurrect though. But this is where things truly started to go downhill, and I think communication failed. Well, I would offer that things were starting to go wrong a paragraph ago, and that communication isn't really the issue here. But let's continue. Basically, I accepted the deal, got resurrected, before going home to Kakariko Village, finished up my job, and went to my character's family home in town. You see, I was keeping a secret at this point of my Sheikah nature, as my character was part of a royal family. I was doing some research back at home, trying to figure out how I came back to life, and then, out of nowhere, a guard was murdered by an invisible Hylianoid. I was then framed for it, somehow, and the Artificer, whose character had an honest streak, tried to help, but to no avail. I was kicked out of the house, and that was that. Thus, I had a character goal, but not one that really made any sense. And there was no communication made that this would happen at all. I started to lose interest after that, and after another incident where my casting focus was stolen without my knowledge, I just left the campaign. This caused me to lose interest in 5e, though I still remain interested in other RPGs today. Was I totally justified for having anger for the lack of communication? Or was this a completely unnecessary case of myself just acting out of anxiety? Well, I would say that OP was justified in leaving that game, and perhaps, at the last part, it could be due to some lack of communication, as I was barely able to follow that. Though I'd say that the problems with this game were showing themselves way earlier than that. I think this DM just didn't really know what he was doing. Though I do have to say that it does suck that this soured OP's taste for 5e. And letting whatever this was give them a bad outlook on it isn't really that justified. But at least he was able to get into some other tabletop RPG systems. But I do have to put a side note here. If a Zelda tabletop RPG sounds like something any of you would be interested in, I highly encourage y'all to go over and check out Literary DM's YouTube channel, where he runs a pretty great actual play of a Legend of Zelda tabletop RPG called Zelda DnD Winds of Calamity. Plus, he makes other tabletop RPG content that is pretty top-notch, so be sure to go check out his channel when you get a chance. But with that plug out of the way, let's move on. The Monk Who Kept Losing Limbs and Staring into the Void for Immersion, by Reddit user PokeGuy11. Spoilers for Lost Minds of Phandelver. This is the goofy tale of how my DM got me to stare at a black screen for 4 hours during a session of D&D. Not really a scary horror story like some of them on the subreddit, more like a Goosebumps novel. This happened during the second half of 2020, so details might be a little fuzzy, but I hope you find this story as funny as I do. For context, I was very bored during the pandemic and decided to get into my third weekly D&D game. The DM, a friend of mine from a previous game, had talked to me about potentially running a game soon, and I expressed my interest. It was hosted on Roll20, given that we were in the middle of lockdown at the time. The game would run the fairly standard Lost Minds of Phandelver module, with no change to the story, but a single homebrew rule added. This rule would unknowingly be what spelled my doom so many sessions later. The rule was the integration of the Lingering Injuries table. If you're unaware, Lingering Injuries is an optional rule found in the Dungeon Master's Guide that has a list of possible permanent injuries that characters might sustain from certain circumstances. Our DM would ask us to roll for an injury every time we hit 0 HP, probably to increase the difficulty of the game. The severity of these injuries is pretty varied, with the range being from dismemberment to just cosmetic scarring. None of the players objected to this rule as far as I can remember, but we did find it a bit strange. Our party was fairly well distributed, with a cleric, paladin, sorcerer, and me playing the monk. Though it would be this monk that suffered throughout our game. The first session was pretty standard. We encountered the main hook, fought a goblin ambush, and went to rescue the main NPC. What was not standard was my awful luck. I could not roll well at all for anything, and all the enemies rolled spectacularly against me. In the first session, I was the only character to go down when fighting a goblin ambush, and I was the first one to roll on the injury table. Of course, it was a nat 1, so I lost an eye immediately, meaning that I had disadvantage on ranged attacks and perception checks. It kinda sucked, not gonna lie, but I could handle it. The second session was uneventful, just some scrapes and scratches for my comrades, but no debilitating injuries. Though the third session was when my bad luck reared its ugly head once again. We fought some red band guys when entering Phandalin. In this fight, I would be downed for the second and third time, so 2 more injury rolls. The second injury roll was okay. Nothing a little healing wouldn't fix. But on the third one, I rolled a 3, so my monk is now missing a foot, halving my speed and causing me to fall prone after taking the dash action. Not the best for the highly mobile monk, but hey, maybe I can get a cool prosthetic. I would in fact get a prosthetic, though I'd hardly say it was cool. We visited the carpenter in the 4th session, and my monk would get outfitted with a carved wooden leg from a table, restoring my speed, but not the falling prone. At this point, I was having thoughts about retiring or killing this character and getting someone without all the debuffs, but little did I know how much worse it would get. We decided to drive out the red brands from the town, so for the next 3 sessions, we would be slowly progressing through their hideout in an effort to eliminate their boss. About halfway through, we would find some townsfolk being held prisoner deep in the hideout, and a fight would break out while we tried to free them. I would be downed several times in this fight, almost to the point of it being comical. But it was the last 2 injury rolls that would really matter. My monk would roll a 2 and a 1 on the injury table, losing a hand and his remaining eye, meaning he was now blind and could only hold a single object at a time. This is really when I decided that this character would act so recklessly that there would be no way that he wouldn't die. And then I could finally play something that didn't get a limb hacked off every time we fought. During the days before the game, the DM announced that he had figured out the vision controls for our characters on Roll20, fixing some issues that we had early on. And I suppose, while he was at it, he decided to turn my character's vision off entirely. So, for the next session, I had a surreal experience. I sat at my computer, staring into a pitch-black screen for hours. I sat in a voice call on Discord with a blank screen where the Roll20 map should have been in front of me. Needless to say, I was super checked out of that session and struggled to hold my laughter in. When this session ended, I asked him why he decided to turn my vision off, to which he responded, "I wanted it to be more immersive." After he said that, I told him that I was bored staring at a black screen, to which he relented and restored my sight of the Roll20 board for the next session. TLDR. My party plays with the injuries table. My monk loses both eyes, and so my DM decides that I should be blind too. You know, for immersion. Oof, I can understand wanting the players to be immersed, but that is a bit overkill in my opinion. No wonder OP checked out. Personally, I can't really see how an injury table in a game of Dungeons & Dragons can really add to the fun. Though, at the same time, I'm not going to say that anyone doing so is wrong if they enjoy that type of thing. Though you would think that at the point that the character lost an eye and had a foot lobbed off, he would throw in the towel and retire to a small village somewhere. Or at least become a pirate captain. But at least OP seemed to take it in stride, and talk to his DM about why it wasn't fun to not be able to see anything as a player. Hopefully, his next character will have a bit more luck. On to the next story. Trial by Problem Player by Reddit user Lacerna26. I've been fortunate that my troubling tabletop RPG encounters have been few and far between since getting into the hobby over a decade ago. But this one stuck out with one player as a stinker. Back in 2019, I was invited to an online Pathfinder 1st Edition game by a local fellow DM who I met through unrelated social media. I wanted to go simple for my first character for a new group, so I rolled a human fighter with a couple of wizard levels. I made her a plucky go-getter near the start of her adventuring career. Her motivations were altruistic and simple. Find her missing twin sister who had been captured by the main enemy faction. It's worth noting that I was the only female player, and my character was the only female player character. But everyone in the group was welcoming, and I didn't sense any red flags. We were given a trial to join an adventurer mercenary guild that had been fighting cultists related to the big bad faction. To pass, we needed to survive the night in an undead-infested graveyard while defeating a certain amount. And we managed to do so without much trouble, with all the player characters getting to show off their stuff. Overall, a smooth first session. That is, until one of the other players, gesturing towards my greatsword-toting undead butt-kicking player character, suggests that the group celebrates by selling the woman off. We can find a buyer in the seedier parts of town and celebrate with the gold that she fetches us. That way, she'll actually be good for something. A moment passes with the group in stunned silence, and before anyone can sound the invocation of, "Dude, not cool," that player backtracks and says that he doesn't expect the group to actually go through with it. That his intention was to make a character that started out by rubbing the party the wrong way. Well, I would say mission accomplished in that aspect, only he also rubbed the players the wrong way as well. But that the character would come to see the error of his ways, thanks to character development spurred by friendship and teamwork. Suffice to say, the wannabe slave trader never got the chance, as the player was uninvited from the group shortly after the session ended. The rest of us continued the campaign and had a grand time, and the DM is now one of my roommates and closest friends. This was the game where the real first trial was the problem player that had to be kicked along the way. Honestly, if that player wanted to make a character that would be at odds with the party starting out, and then come to accept them through character development later, there are so many other ways to go about that before resorting to that extreme. I mean, if you do want to have a character that is that much of a scumbag, that is the type of thing that should be discussed during a session 0. That way, something like that isn't just sprung up out of the blue on people. Though, as some people in the comments of the post pointed out, maybe that wasn't it, and he just backtracked after seeing all the reactions from the other players. But I am curious, did OP and the group do the right thing in kicking him for that? Or should they have accepted his reasoning, tell him that it wasn't cool for this game, and given him a second chance? I'd love to know what you all think. But as it is Friday, it's time we cap off the week with a bit of whimsy with a DnD Glory story. Mazes and Mothers, A Tale of the Satanic Panic, by Reddit user John LSTL. My mother was a religion teacher at a Catholic high school. Sometime around 84 to 85 or so, she asked to join in a role-playing game with my friends and I. She had no doubt encountered some of the devil worship hype and decided to check it out for herself. We were about 10 or 11 years old at the time and playing basic D&D badly. But, you know, we were still young enough that Mom joining in, while a bit weird, wasn't totally uncool. So hey, game on. We gave her a thief that somebody had rolled up but passed on. So, we're at the entrance to the keep on the Borderlands, being asked our names and occupations. Everybody else was like, "I am such and such, the fighter." But when it was my mom's turn to speak, she said, "I am so and so, the leather merchant." There was a sudden shocked silence, and then somebody pointed out to her that she was playing not a leather merchant, but a thief. She responded, "Of course, but if I tell them that, they'll never let me into their castle." Another round of stunned silence passed, as nodding appreciation of her subterfuge sunk in, and the adventure continued apace. Satisfied that nothing we were doing in the basement constituted a threat to our immortal souls, my mother never joined in again after that day. Just the same, I have the Satan scare to thank for giving our group a quantum leap forward in verisimilitude and immersion, and for the one time I got to play D&D with my mom. Wow, I never thought that a story about the satanic panic around Dungeons & Dragons could come out to be so wholesome. It just goes to show that there were some religious people back then that had common sense that kids pretending to be fantasy characters in the safety and comfort of their own homes really wasn't them summoning demons. Seriously, when you look back on all the moral panic around Dungeons & Dragons, it really is kind of astonishing. And while it did make life a living hell for some kids back then, at least OP, in this case, has a good memory of it. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.